Then let's start our panel discussion and switch into English due to our international guests. The panel focuses on the impact of EU research and innovation funding programs and on the future potential to strengthen European research and innovation capacity. The questions are, what do we need in Europe to stay ahead? How can we, on a EU as well as on a national level, strengthen our competitiveness? And finally, what impact can be achieved by funding programs? The participants are Mark Ferguson, Director General, Science Foundation Ireland. Welcome to Vienna and welcome to the floor. Peter Prenninger, Corporate Research Coordination, AVL List GmbH. Herzlich willkommen. Michael Staudinger, Director, Central Institute for Meteorology and Geodynamics, ZAMG. Klement TOCKNER, President, Austrian Science Fund. And Lena TSIPOURI, Professor of Economics, National and Kapodistrian, University of Athens, Greece. Welcome to Vienna. So, Mark, I would like to start with you and would like to ask you, in your opinion, what are the main challenges of Europe in RTDI in comparison to our main competitors? Where are we strong? And where do we have to catch up?
Very good. So, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. Ich spreche Englisch, nicht Deutsch. Mein Deutsch ist sehr schlecht. Mein Irish is sehr, sehr schlecht. So thank you very much indeed. And I'd like to say a few words. I'll maybe show one or two of the slides. If we can just put the slides up for a moment, please. Thank you. So if you look at the principles of science and innovation funding, excellence is absolutely required, but it's not sufficient. You need impact. And you also need a diverse portfolio of uncorrelated risk. What do I mean by that? I mean support for young people, support for established investigators, large projects, small projects, cooperative projects, and so on. You need an intelligent mix between scientists choosing what they want to research and being told where to look. So both of those are important, particularly for university rectors. The folly of rewarding A whilst hoping for B. So if you're really looking for some kind of impact into new company formation or into startups, it's not done by rewarding people, for example, who publish papers in Nature or Science, because what you measure is what you get. And so we need support for outstanding people, for outstanding projects, centres, infrastructure, and investment, collaboration, and so on. And there's a discussion about themes and missions which are part of the European proposal for Horizon Europe, and I was part of the group that put that together. And I just want to quote from what is probably the most successful mission in the world, namely the US space mission. And what Kennedy said is shown in his famous speech at Rice University here. It said, "We chose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard." And then my emphasis, because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and which we intend to win, and the others too. So a really critical part of missions is bringing people together and getting real value from a very large community of people, all focused on the same objective, and by the way, all focused on winning. And there is a new opportunity in science and a new opportunity for science in Europe. For example, the Americans have abdicated their responsibility under climate change. Could Europe take a lead there? Would that be a mission? Could we really lead the world on that? Because America's not going to do it. So there are other things that we need to think about in these missions to really pull people together in a very, very important and interesting way. A few words about impact. Impact is essentially the demonstrable effect that excellent research makes to science and the economy. It's as simple as that. It's about the effect of the science. And so there's a lot of discussion about how you measure impact. And one grouping, which is a small advanced economies grouping, and you can see the countries that are involved with that there, got together and produced what I believe is a very important impact framework on which you can measure almost any domain of science. And you measure it under a pillar of impact in 6 pillars and 3 cross-cutting themes. So the 6 pillars relate to the economy, that's obvious. Health and well-being, how you keep people healthy, how you keep them happy. Natural capital and built environment means essentially the environment, both natural and cities. Policy and public services, future capacity and skills, you can read it for yourself. So under those 6 domains, I think you can describe all areas of science in terms of their impact, and 3 cross-cutting themes, which you see there, which are essentially new things, improving existing things, and unexpected things. So if you think about that simple framework for impact, you can then build on that a series of measures on which you can see what your science is doing. So just to close with 3 slides. First of all, this is a time of absolutely unprecedented change and absolutely unprecedented opportunity. I believe it is the most exciting time ever to be alive in science. The most exciting time ever. Why is that? First of all, there's a very fast pace of discovery. Knowledge generation is no longer the rate-limiting step. We have oodles and oodles of data and knowledge. Translating that data into products and services and new opportunities is also equally important. Innovation is very widespread and democratized. The internet, the mobile phone have democratized science. You can do science now without going to a library, without having a huge infrastructure. You can access more information than any human being was ever able to do in history. And that's a really interesting opportunity, the democratization of science. This data deluge that we live in is really interesting because the challenge is to turn the data into knowledge, into wisdom, and then into products. So data is just a starting point, but it's a better starting point than no data. And obviously the blurring of interdisciplinary disciplines, there's no such thing anymore as basic and applied and curiosity. It's all one kind of merger. I'm very fond of saying there are only 2 kinds of science, good science and bad science, and we really want to do good science. Prioritization is on every government's agenda, and so it should be, particularly for small countries. It's important to think about what we want to do. Scale is important, you've heard about it. Everybody wants value for money. Everybody has increasing levels of accountability. Totally proper, because there are never increasing scales of funding being applied to the system. And obviously we have huge societal and economic challenges to solve. But I remind you that market share is won or lost at times of great change. If you think about the mobile phone and you think about the companies that have ebbed and flowed in that, think about Nokia, think about Ericsson, think about BlackBerry, which were dominant in the market and are now almost nowhere. Now think about the iPhone, Apple, Samsung, and so on. So at times of great change, there's a real opportunity to capture market, and that's the opportunity for Europe right now to become more preeminent on the world stage than we've ever been before. So 2 final slides. Why should the European Union and member states increase their investment in research and innovation? That's a perfectly reasonable question. There are loads of other things to spend public money on: hospitals, schools, roads, infrastructure, social services, and so on. So I would argue it's absolutely crucial for our future to address citizens' concerns and to provide rewarding employment, very important in a rapidly changing world, to grow the economy, enhancing EU productivity and competitiveness, to contribute decisively to the Commission and the European objectives, which you can see here, digital single market and so on, and to maintain and grow Europe's presence in a world where other competitors are increasingly investing in the research and innovation system. Look at the sharp rise of China, of South Korea, and so on. And also, there's a very high level of investment in R&I at European level is important as well as at national level, because that will achieve critical mass. That's very important for small countries like Ireland and for Austria. We can't do everything well, only a limited number of people, only a limited budget. To strengthen the scientific excellence, to leverage other funding, whether it be private or philanthropic, to boost competitiveness, to increase the attractiveness of Europe. The ERC has been very effective in that. and actually to have a positive stimulating effect. National and European money are synergistic. There are lots of studies that show that. So I think this is a very exciting time. I think impact is really, really important. I hope I've said some controversial things that will spark the discussion, and with that, I've answered your question.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Mark Ferguson. Professor TSIPOURI, let's focus on the new approaches now, which have been mentioned already within Horizon Europe. European Innovation Council and the mission-oriented approach. Are the new approaches promising? What do you think?
First of all, thank you and the FFG for the invitation. Ich möchte mich auf Deutsch bedanken and then also turn into English. The new concepts are not very new. I mean, missions, as Mark said, the first mission goes back to 1963, so we can't say they're new. I think the real challenge is how we implement the new concepts. A mission, California has just come out with a mission, and they don't call it a mission. They said, we're going to have a zero-emission electricity production by 2045, zero-emission, 100% electricity production. Now, this is a mission. It doesn't need to be called a mission. I think the real challenge for Horizon Europe is how the missions are going to be implemented. And the English have this very nice saying that the devil is in the detail. So I think that the idea of having missions should not be translated into having too many missions. This is one of the dangers of implementation. Theoretically, we could call every project a mission, and this would be a total disaster for the mission orientation. On the other hand, prioritization and selecting a mission is not easy. And I think it has already been mentioned that this is one of the problems of the negotiation at the moment. What are the missions that we are going to choose? Are they going to be 2 or 3? Are they going to be 10? And there we have a negotiation. For me, the important part for the mission concept to be successful is to keep it down to a small number and to follow the guidelines of what it is suggested conceptually. So find a mission that needs both basic research and has a probability of impact, be measurable, and be able to organize the milestones. So that far about the missions. Now, on the European Innovation Council, this is also a new concept, a new agenda, a new umbrella organization, if you want it. But there have been many efforts to support innovation in Europe in the past, and for instance, the SME instrument that has been mentioned quite a few times here was practically one of the missions of the functions of the European Innovation Council. So I think what the Innovation Council needs to do is to be open-minded, and let me be a little bit provocative. It should not focus on the European research and innovation area. Innovation is now global. If you want startups and companies to be successful, they have to be global. So the European Innovation Council, unlike the past, has to be open and help the young innovators to globalize quickly. So I hope I answered your questions.
Let me just add one question. In our introduction over there, we have been talking about impact measurement. What are the most important indicators in your eyes to measure the impact of research, and what indicators would you recommend for Horizon Europe?
I think there again we have to start with concepts. I mean, impact can be very high from a project that fails to reach its goals. And I think this needs to be very clear. It's not just failure, because failure sometimes eliminates technologies that might absorb a lot of funds. So I think measuring the impact is an extremely difficult task, because you have social impact and private impact. Private return on investment, companies making money, is a good impact. But the social return on investment, so fighting climate change, may not create profits, but may be highly valuable. On the other hand, we have short-term impacts and long-term impacts, and there I think we very often make mistakes. We confuse short-term with large impact, and this is not the same thing. Now, I could talk hours about that, and I know we don't have enough time, so I want to conclude by answering your question and saying there are certain measures that we use systematically, like publications, citations, patents, new companies formation, and so on. These are good measures, but they are just the quantitative part. I think we have to go beyond that. Now, in the internet era, we have what we call the alt metrics, so are different metrics like, you know, how viral does your result become? And what I want to stress is that we need to use the appropriate indicators for long-term, short-term, private, public, and failure and success, because the attribution is a really big problem. I have an artifact that was asked to show. I don't know if I can have the slide. It's too big to bring it to the audience.
Okay.
But, you know, one of the Greek universities, a Greek research center actually, created a very, very nice artifact, which is this huge laser instrument that can clear national heritage. It started with the Acropolis and the Caryatides, and now it's also bought by the Chinese for the Chinese ceramics army. Now, if you ask me, what project, what program, what funding has created this impact, actually we can't answer that. There have been 4 successful framework program funding sources, national funding sources, and each one has contributed a little bit to this success story, which has an impact, a societal impact, because it clears national heritage, but you can't really measure which project has had which impact.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your contribution in this example. Let's proceed to Professor Tockner. When we focus on the role of basic research in the EU framework program, ERC, but also the role of basic research within the EIC, it's not easy, and the Pillar Global Challenges. Are you fully satisfied with Pillar 1 of Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe?
I think generally it's a great success that there is an increase in budget overall. I'm never fully satisfied. This is, but we have to consider it. The first is, Mark Ferguson already mentioned it, the synergy between the national funding and the European funding. So we have to consider this in both ways. The second aspect is if we are looking on the science of science and what we can learn about this, there's one aspect is that we should not ask too early on the impact, we should ask on the innovation. And this is a difference. It's also for funding organization. We are not looking, because if you are too early on looking on the impact, it is constraining the innovation behind this as well. And we have to be very careful about this. The third aspect is that the 3 pillars, because the danger or the risk might be that the best scientists, they are just focusing on Pillar 1. And they say we go for the ERC and so on, but we need these people also in Pillar 2 and Pillar 3. So there has to be everything done that there's a strong attractiveness that these people also engage and are involved in Pillars 2 and Pillar 3. This was a lesson from, I would say, from earlier programs, that due to many reasons, the one is administrative issues, the second is all these deliverables and milestone, which is a little bit of bookkeeping as well, that may constrain this kind of innovation and these bottom-up aspects. So this is, and maybe another from these lessons of the science of sciences, that research is and will be done much more in teams and much more in interdisciplinary teams. And this we have to consider as well in how to form interdisciplinary teams and how to support them as well. Had been mentioned this morning already as well. And if we consider impact, there's a too strong focus just on the economic impact, but it has to be considered much broader than just pure economic impact.
We have just awarded the Nurturing Talents Prize, and you have been involved into this award. What are, from your point of view, the most important activities to remain or even further strengthen the Austrian success within the ERC?
I mean, what we see is that the strong national funding is a prerequisite to be successful at the European level. 80% of the ERC grantees in Austria have previously an FWF record. So this is one aspect. The second aspect is, which is fundamental, and is there's a culture, a scientific culture where competition at highest level, where excellence and so on is really valued and seen as something very important. I think this is the two, and this is again this complementarity between the national and the European funding.
We should not focus on the impact too early, said Klement TOCKNER. Do you all agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't agree. So I think that scientists are too scientific about impact, okay? So I go to meetings of the Irish government and people talk about the case for building social housing or the case for building a road, and there's an economic impact study, and all of the assumptions in that are much more loose than any of the assumptions that you have in any impact assessment of science. So we are in a competitive situation to get money for science, and we keep making excuses about how we can't measure it. We've got to stop doing that, okay? So the one thing that every project produces are trained people. Absolutely every project produces trained people. So you can track those people. You can show that they earn more money. You can show that they pay more tax. You can show that they found companies. You can show that they attract companies. They are a really positive incentive, and you get that out of every project. You also get out of every project something to do with either the society or the economy. What I think is really important is that people don't engage deeply in the impact agenda. So I see people who say, my project is really important for policy. And the first question I would say is, have you ever met the Secretary General of that department? Have you met anybody in that government department? Do you know anybody there? Because if you don't, the chances of your research having impact are virtually zero, because you are assuming that somebody's going to read a paper and take it on board in a busy policy agenda. So I think we need to be much more proactive. I think we need to stop making excuses. I think we need to say, look, you can measure this stuff. It's pretty straightforward. It's a lot more robust than the assumptions that sit behind an awful lot of other investments, whether they be road or social housing or social security or what have you. And then, of course, you get added benefits on top of that, like you sometimes get new companies and you sometimes get whole disruptions in science. But the core business of training people is an economically very sound business. So I'm actually very proactive in saying you can measure impact. And then the second thing I'll say, just to be even more provocative, is that in science policy, I would say scientists love evidence in all policy except science policy, in which case any old anecdote will do. So the situation in terms of science policy is the best database in the world for impact out of research is the UK's Research Excellence Framework submissions, a huge database. The mean time to impact in all domains out of the research assessment exercise in the UK is 2.5 years.
Thank you for this provocation. Lena TSIPOURI wants to add something, and then Michael Staudinger.
I would rather agree with the first speaker, and this is the problem. The problem is again conceptual, because what is output, what is outcome, what is impact? Yeah. You can see the outcome of a project immediately, and I would argue that, I mean, for my terminology, training people is not impact. The impact is if the trained people then at a later stage produce something. But you have immediate outcomes, you can have immediate outputs, but you don't have immediate impact. If we are lucky in a project and we have immediate impact, we are just lucky. But usually the impact is accumulated over time. So I agree it's measurable. I agree we have to measure it. It's a responsibility vis-a-vis taxpayers to measure it. But I disagree we can measure it immediately. And I'm very, very skeptical about the impact assessments. So we can come back to that maybe later.
Thank you. Michael Staudinger, what do you think?
A slightly different perspective. I'm responsible for a Met service, and impact and operations is everything there. No? It's about life and safety, so impact is extremely important. On the other hand, if you look at the history of meteorology and the history of climatology, at the beginning, people were recording temperatures and the weather for curiosity. No? It was basic science, and they just did it for fun. Okay, today, these measurements, going back 200 years, going back in Innsbruck, for example, nearly 300 years, are extremely valuable that we have them to understand climate change. So you don't see the impact, in many cases, you do not see the impact right away. And to have the right mixture between how much to invest in basic science, which might not be impact related, and how much to invest in impact-related sciences. No? This balance has to be found in each case. No? And you can't do it just, let's make it 50-50 or something else. No?
Thank you. Peter Prenninger, let us now focus on a very concrete and very successful project of one of the, I would like to say, strongest Austrian enterprises within Horizon 2020 you are representing. Can you give us a short presentation of this project? What was the aim of the project, and which innovative advantage do you expect?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for being invited here for AVL, showing here a successful project which was, and maybe we can see that on the screen, which was on the edge or in between the 7th and 8th framework program, the Horizon 2020, in which this project ended. It is not very typical maybe, but very special for AVL. We are a global company. We're about 10,000 employees with a turnover of 1.5 billion euros. We have 4,000 employees in Austria, 6,000 worldwide, so therefore another 3,000 in Europe. And what the speciality there is, this is something very particular. We are dealing with development of powertrains, with instrumentation, with simulation tools. These are things which are maybe not as visible, but they are particularly important for Austria, not only for AVL as a company. We have other companies, also very, very advanced, very special, I would not say niches, they are very particular products in instrumentation, in simulation, which are produced, which are maybe not as much on the stage, but they are very, very important actually for the development of systems, and so therefore they have a multiple impact. They have really a big lever actually. And this is one example. We have been developing for decades, let's say, conventional powertrain systems. Now we are into the edge of a new area of powertrains, electric powertrains, and that was all about, and one can read that, with advancing methods and tools to develop new electric powertrains. Very obviously, we are facing a situation that the introduction of these new powertrains is difficult. Simply, they are expensive, they may be not as reliable, and that was all about that, to advance that. So the impact actually, and if we go to the next page, we'll see that this has the whole impact on the whole industry. With these tools, these new powertrains can be, and maybe the next page, which could show up, or which could have been. One can see that these tools actually, they have an effect on the entire development process, the industrial development process of such new powertrains, fully electric powertrains. This project was on European level simply because there is a cooperation on European level needed. There were OEMs which are not in Austria by chance. We are sitting in Austria by good chance. So, however, we need a European approach by all means. And this project created not only an immediate impact on the development of those powertrains, but now in Horizon 2020 we have a follow-up project. So Asterix does not come without Obelix. So we have the Obelix project now. And in this Obelix project we are aiming for now dedicated improvement. We are increasing range 30%, we are increasing reliability 20% of electric powertrains. And this has an immediate impact on the next generation, and I was asked from the organizer from FFG to bring the future, and here is the future. This is a fuel cell powertrain. So we are now introducing the electric powertrains in the market, and this is the next generation. This is the future. And just in the moment we are together with the joint undertaking fuel cells and hydrogen, we are trying to get a similar project in this area where we get the technology and the tools also to introduce this next generation much faster than without that.
And what concrete impact do you achieve with your project in terms of financial, societal? Does it make you a global front runner? And what would you say, who are the main profiteers?
The impact which I can explicitly mention here is we are, as I've mentioned, we are coming from the development of classical powertrains. In the last couple of years, also because of that project, the turnover we make now, 30% of that is already from this electrification business. So that includes also hybrids and so forth. So which means immediately one can see from the success of this company, and a major part of the growth of that was because of such projects. And on a societal basis, on a general basis, very obviously, with many of the electric powertrains, with the battery developments needed for that, that is based on that, and that has an immediate impact, because otherwise we will not be able to achieve these targets of CO2 reduction or CO2 neutrality. So it has an immediate impact also on air quality, on living standards and things like that.
Thank you. Michael Staudinger, first of all, thank you for the wonderful weather outside, because I know meteorologists and TV anchors are always responsible for the weather. Let's talk about a successful project with societal impact, Unitics. Can you give us a short illustration of the project, and how do we as a society benefit from the outcomes of the project, and what would happen if this project wouldn't have been funded?
Thanks so much. This stands for European Natural Airborne Disaster Information and Crisis System. And it was based on 2010, when in Iceland this volcano Eyjafjallajökull burst out from one moment to the next, and Europe was the first time confronted with the volcano situation. Air traffic collapsed. And usually, if you look at the sky and you see the planes passing by, you think, gee, these people are having a good time sitting in a plane, sipping champagne, and I have to work down here. You do not guess how much European infrastructure depends on traffic system. And the air traffic system is one of the essential ones. And all those people being stranded then for days, and also the train and the road system being completely overloaded and not able to cope with what would have needed in air transport. It showed that we are much more vulnerable than we thought. Now, what does this project do? It's 21 partners in 12 countries, from academia, from operational services like Met Services, from science institutions like the German DLR, and other institutions. And it brings together people in this interdisciplinary approach from very different fields, saying if something like this, and it might be airborne disasters, might be a volcano, it might be forest fire, or it might be a radioactive accident. How do we get the data together? How do we develop models which describe the very tricky situation which we had then in Iceland at the volcano, that there was no measurement right away next to the volcano, because you would have needed measurements in 1,000, 2,000, up to 12,000 meters of the concentration of the ash and how it's dispersing. How do you get a measurement system at the place to measure what comes out from the volcano, how is it dispersing in the area, and how is it dispersing three-dimensional over Europe, over other parts of the world, and then give advice to the volcano ash advisory centers, which are national competences for air control, and also to Eurocontrol, and say this area is safe, this area is not safe, and there's in the next 3 days, 4 days, there might be safe conditions again. So it's to reduce vulnerability of a very delicate system we all depend on. That's UNEDX. If you ask me what would have happened if it would have been funded, the honest answer is nothing. Nothing on the first day, and nothing on the second day. But the moment you have a serious situation, again with airborne disasters, if you start to think about these problems too late, you have no chance to act in the right way. So a precautionary system, which is the basis of all our well-being, and this is the basis of our civilization. A precautionary system is extremely important. And for us, for ZAMG, for the Austrian Met Service, it was an extremely good combination of other scientists from other fields, and it was an extremely good possibility to develop the dispersion systems where we have lots of experts on, but to develop them further on and to work in this regard.
Mm-hmm. You are working together with universities and SME. difficult or how easy is it to manage these different partners?
At first sight, you might say 21 partners is a flea circus, as we say in German. No? But if you know the mindset of the different partners, and of course, a university has a very different mindset than operational service. No? They're broader thinking, they're more into basic science, but they discover problems which you, if in operational services, you might not so easily see right away. So the combination to see the different mindsets and combine them in the right way, and also understand the interests of SMEs, that they have to make money, they have to survive till tomorrow. If you have the right project management, then it's more a challenge, but it's very enriching for yourself because you see different ways of managing an institution, you see different ways how things can be brought forward. So for us, it was very enriching.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have asked you to bring some examples just for illustration. We have seen two. You brought us the picture of the Acropolis project. What have you brought?
So what I have in these two tubes, in this tube here, this is exfoliated graphene, which is in an ink form in water. So it's graphene aqueous format in water. It's a two-dimensional material, one of the new materials. And this is boron nitrate, which is also a two-dimensional material, and it's also an aqueous solution, which is water. And the big thing about this is that graphene is a very good conductor, and boron nitrate is a very good insulator. And what does that mean? It means that you can print an electronic circuit on a piece of paper, which is what this is, or you can print it on a piece of clothing, or you can print it on almost anything you want. So this is a very good example of a European project, the Graphene project, which is a FET flagship. It's also a very good illustration of the symbiosis between national funding and EU funding. This was done in Ireland and through a research centre that Science Foundation Ireland funds. That's also a major partner in the Graphene flagship. So the combination of both national and European funding, and these materials will revolutionise a lot of what we do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for this example. How did you bring it through the airport security?
Very, very simple. I put this in the bag where I have my shampoo, and everybody assumed, that this was some form of cosmetic or shampoo, and they never asked me, and I never told them.
So be careful and don't use it in the shower in the evening. Klement TOCKNER, what did you bring us?
I brought a magnet. It's not a superconducting magnet yet, but it's a sample from CERN, because CERN is, I think, a very good example of European collaboration and global leadership by Europe. And in particle sciences, they need to develop the strongest magnets. And this development is also then of huge benefits, for example, for image analysis, which will be used for health or also for transportation systems.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Michael Staudinger, what did the meteorologist bring?
Okay.
Oh, surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. Yeah? And you might say this is a little bit of a worn-out joke if a meteorologist comes with an umbrella. I'd like to show it as the sort of luxury problems we have, no? Because most people, weather forecast, do I need an umbrella or not? No? True. And it's part of our business to give the right answers. But it's a luxury problem. And let me say one word about the mission idea, which we said at the very beginning. For me, it's very important, and I would recommend very much to read Mariana Mazzucato's work and other regards as well, because for science, it's so important what she's saying about value creation. We proposed a mission of making a 3-month forecast with a 70 to 80% certainty. Why? Because droughts, and this is the country of the umbrella, droughts are going to be the main problem in southern parts of Europe in the future. And to know when droughts are happening and which year, and to make adequate provisions for food security, this will be the challenge in the future. And that's why knowing will a drought or will a long rain period come, this would completely change how the public would understand climate change. Because the mission idea, and you were a little bit critical about the Californians not calling a mission, going back to Kennedy, it involved the whole population. No? And to have a mission and involve everybody has a very high value. And that's why I think umbrella, or the not needing an umbrella because of a drought and making a good forecast for that for 3 months, that would be important.
Okay, thank you very much. And do we need the umbrella on a weekend? No. Okay. Peter Prenninger.
Yeah, maybe to add a few words to this. Of course, this is a model of the fuel cell powertrain. Also, what we're developing is of a high power density. Still, this is a model. But it should also emphasize the importance, what we call, of virtual powertrain development or virtual product development in general, which means we can, to a large extent, develop not only the system itself, but also to investigate the reliability, the performance, all on a virtual level, which increases very much the time to market to speed up the market times. And an example, on the conventional powertrain, we do approximately 80% of the control development, the control system development, already on a virtual basis. And so, therefore, it is so important that also for new products, for new generations of powertrain systems, such tools are available so that they can become competitive. And that's also one aim of this project, and on that what we are generally working.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for the artifacts. I have one final question for you all, for you and you and you and you. If you were responsible for the design of an EU framework program, and your only guideline would be strengthening the RTDI competitiveness of Europe, how would it look like? Who wants to start?
I'll start if you want. I would fund missions. I would fund a very small number of very important missions. And I think there are two important words. A very small number means 2 or 3, and very important means things that are really important to people, whether that be topical issues like immigration, or whether it be future issues like food or energy or what have you. Things where you really need people to cooperate and where you really cannot achieve it on your own. An example of a European mission as opposed to a global mission, because what I've just spoken about are global missions, would be we could make the Atlantic Ocean the best understood and most predictable ocean in the world. The Atlantic Ocean laps onto the shores of many European countries, not Austria, but it does for many European countries, so it's a European project, also laps onto the shores of North America and Canada. And understanding that ocean and predicting it is very important for weather, for fisheries, for plastic, for all kinds of stuff. So we can think about things that are European, that are really, really important, that really require people to come together. And that's what I would do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I think to do everything to attract and to support the most creative talents. They are required that these missions are becoming a success.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I would increase the failure rate, because what worries me always with evaluations is that they come out and say 95% of the projects that were funded were successful. Well, that is no rationale for funding research. And I think I would go back to what I said before. High impact is not immediate impact. So I think there is this technology readiness level, the TRL, which is very important as a measurement. And we say we go for applied research and we want high TRLs. But if all the projects succeed, it means we don't make disruptive change. So I would rather incorporate more risk into the projects and imitate a little bit the DARPA and Energy ARPA United States philosophy, which says if you have high risk, you have high reward, and that's how you can measure impact. And eventually, sometimes impact comes from the unintended consequences of a project. So I think if I would be the commissioner, I would increase risk.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
I would try to bring science more in the focus of the general population. And of course, with this 100 billion, hundreds of projects will be done. But to pick, as it was said before, Mr. Ferguson, to pick a couple which people understand. And as was said by Minister Fassmann, in one incurable cancer, right answers to climate change, which involve people's mindset. And it's not just something that should be delegated to politics or to technique. It needs people's mindsets to change if you want to do something about climate change. That this would be the basis for good missions. No? That's how we do it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Peter.
I partly disagree with Mr. Ferguson. we have on European level for Horizon Europe, there are some topics under discussion, societal challenges, which I'm afraid to say that they need political solutions and there are no scientific questions anymore. And what I have a little bit the impression is that society and so therefore also politics are a little bit afraid to solve these because some of them may would hurt. We certainly have scientific and technology challenges, and those are the ones which can be tackled by science, by fundamental and applied science and research. So we should not mix up, and what I would really recommend to think about what missions are really reasonable missions for science and technology and not something which is something for society simply to solve even if it's very unpleasant. We have just conducted also in a coordination support action for the European Commission an investigation comparing the funding schemes in US, in Japan, in Brazil, Japan, in China. And what turned out there is the more the research is focused, of course driven by missions, but the focus itself is on the research topics and not the big scale things, because otherwise you lose the point where you can really invent new things, where you can create new know-how. That's what I would see, what I would prefer.
Thank you very much. You want to respond? No.
No, I just say one thing, and that is that, you know, science should not abdicate its responsibility to society. And this is going to become more important. So artificial intelligence and machine learning in the next 5 years will probably displace a huge number of jobs. So what I chose the word displace. So net new technology creates more jobs than it destroys, but you displace large numbers of people. So for example, a leading law firm in Ireland that I won't name set a challenge to one of the research groups that we fund to develop an algorithm in 8 weeks that would outcompete its leading counsel on predicting the outcome of a corporate law case. And 2 years in, the algorithm is winning. If you want to know as a company whether your chances of suing a competitor are more or less likely, you are much better to consult the algorithm than you are a very expensive corporate lawyer. And so you can see disruption right across society. What's the implication of that for universities? We have to be much, much better at continuous learning and lifelong learning, which is something that none of us do very well. We're very good at educating young people. We're not very good at re-educating people who've been in this field into something radically different. So I think science will have to engage more with citizens, as my colleague here said, and more with society. I agree with you, it's not going to be solving political problems, but we do need to address that, because if we don't, there will be a backlash against science and technology. People will say, these machines that were created by these scientists that we funded from our tax have just taken away our jobs. And that's going to be a really tricky position for people in the future. So we need to be thinking about that as a scientific society and the way in which we engage with society and the way that we engage with politics.
Thank you very much. After the final question, there's always a very last question. How important is networking within the research community? And do you think we deserve a coffee break?
Yes.
Yes. You agree, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you very much for your contribution and the discussion, for the vivid discussion. Thank you. Und meine Damen und Herren, wir gehen jetzt in diese verdiente Kaffeepause eine halbe Stunde und treffen uns wieder pünktlich um 15:30 Uhr hier zu Panel 2. Vielen herzlichen Dank.